Hello there, and welcome to this vlog of January 2024. And I'm not sure if you're going to see this video because there is a good chance that I will never post this, but if I do, here we are. Hello and welcome. Um, I'm really going to have to be careful how I approach this topic though, because I got I'm quite embroiled in it to some extent because there was a big drama on social media, all surrounding the community guidelines that Catalyst Game Labs had posted. And what I saw on there, quite frankly, disgusted me with certain people's responses to it. But in particular, where I was really, really quite angry was in that a lot of very good friends of mine who were, just kind of posting on that page were just being targeted with horrible abuse and just people of disrepute going after good community members. And then I got embroiled into it because I genuinely tend to not deal with things like that in a non-emotive way. It's the one thing that I can just lose my temper over is if I see friends of mine getting targeted like that. Whether that's in day-to-day life or online or in the BattleTech community, because I am very, very friendly with a lot of people across the BattleTech community, and I just saw some really, well, quite frankly, just disgusting behaviour directed at them. Not going to go into any further detail on that really, because that is what it is, as they say, and that's my right to kind of not so much defend people, but certainly tell people when I think that they are completely out of order. And I do tend to do that quite colourfully on social media. I can be very, very stroppy, and I do have a pretty vicious temper. On this, I think I've said this before, but in terms of the recordings that I do, whether it's here or elsewhere, I know how to kind of do a monologue, right? So I can kind of keep calm and cool, and I don't swear, don't use bad language. But in everyday life, I am a very, very different person. This is purely for the camera, really, and because I know that there might be kids watching, and I really don't want to to come across as being disreputable when I know that my audience might be relatively young. So that's why. But then when you're kind of embroiled on social media, and we all, if you go on social media, you'll know that it's very weird and wonderful, and people are kind of turned up to 11 on there anyway. And I just saw some just incredible levels of disingenuousness, incredible levels of grifting, I'd call it, and we'll get into that in a bit. Levels of just the most pathetic, mealy-mouthed nonsense I think I've ever come across, and these people really need to be called out on it. And this is why I'm kind of deliberating doing this video, because I know as soon as I do this and then put it up there, this will attract those people like moths to a flame. They'll be kind of roasting people in the comments section. They'll be sending me all manner of threats. Believe you me, it's happened, even though I am the smallest of small YouTube channels in a pretty niche community. I have still received some pretty, well, actually quite funny. They're not I wouldn't call them threatening. I certainly don't view them as threatening, but just horrible, vile communications, which I think with that, if you're kind of really annoying that kind of person, it probably proves that you're doing something right. So I don't mind that at all. I do mind it though when that kind of spills out into friends of mine because they've just commented on a post online from the company that all the kind of tabletop BattleTech experience revolves around. So I'm not going to go too far into kind of the personal side of this. What I'll talk about instead is why certain people of ill repute, let's just call them that, have been very upset by what has happened, and why I think that they are just basically a pathetic, stupid, idiotic, childish part of the community that we all should work on to try and ostracise. Genuinely mean that as well. You just I can't. I always try to retain some like objectivity, and I will go into some like critical things about what Catalyst did here. But in terms of the kind of the main style, what the people are really, or these people, whatever you want to call them, are really like picking up on, they've just not got a leg to stand on. It's farcical, and they clearly just don't understand how companies operate. They clearly don't have a concept of polite society. I mean, and we'll talk about like the community guidelines, because I'm going to actually read them, and I'll read out some community guidelines on another platform as well, and see how they kind of tally up, and then talk about why this is completely standard for a company to do, and why they've really got to do it in a legal and a like a PR sense as well. It's really, really important. So Catalyst, suffice to say, have done absolutely nothing wrong here. They've just upgraded their community guidelines. I am going to point out some critiques. I work in that field. I certainly wouldn't have done what they did on some of the kind of comms that they put out, and we'll get into that. But just in terms of the first point that they raised, and this is what a lot of the I'd just call it the darker side of the community, really, of which all communities have that, where you've got people who are in it for very, very dubious reasons, and are quite happy to kind of just throw shade and hate on people. It's very obvious what they're doing. They try to kind of hide it under this like veneer of like logic or intelligence. It's not. I mean, I can certainly see through it. I think anyone that's either reasonable or intelligent can see through it. They try it on with me all the time. They try to kind of get you into these weird logic traps. Again, it sounds as arrogant as this sounds. I can't say I really care, because these people are just beneath me, to be honest, and they're beneath the good people in the community. And I don't want to focus this on them. I want to focus it on Catalyst, really, in terms of why what they did was not at all problematic and was completely standard. So let's get into it then. And I'm not going to share my screen here. I'm just going to read it out. I think that's probably the easiest thing to do. So, and this is a post from Catalyst. They will be putting more stuff out about this as well. They kind of say this in the comms here. This is just kind of an introduction to what they'll be doing over the next few weeks. In this, it says, CGL has been busy behind the scenes making some new and exciting community-driven projects. With these projects, we have been hard at work updating our community guidelines. These guidelines will be in effect across all our platforms that are operated by CGL. This will include our forums and social media accounts. And now it just goes to bullet point everything that they're going to talk about. Now, I am only, for the purposes of this certain section of this video, I'm only going to discuss the first point. The first 2 points. The rest of the points I'll deal with it in a separate segment, because that pertains to the IP of BattleTech and like copyright. So these are the 2 points for now. Our game systems are for everyone. Derogatory comments about things including, but not limited to, race, religion, culture, disability, career, sex orientation, or gender identity are not acceptable and will not be excused in these spaces. The second point, respect everyone's privacy. This means no publicly releasing private addresses or phone numbers. Second one on that, I think, is really obvious, right? Like, if you're doxing people online, and I'm guessing they're talking about their probably their staff there more than anything. Maybe their staff are kind of getting heat from people for whatever reason. That's obviously not acceptable. Like, at companies, you should have a go-to person or like a central address. If people are being targeted on their personal social medias or, phone numbers or whatever, that's horrible. But also for the community as well. So there's in Europe, it doesn't really apply to Britain anymore because Brexit, but we adhere to something called the GDPR policies. I know a ton about this because I've written GDPR policies for law firms. GDPR is basically like a data protection thing, and it will say in there like what a company can and can't do with your private data, and the EU are very like strict on that subject. In Britain, we are kind of betwixt and between. I mean, we have to utilise GDPR policies all the time in my job. If you're kind of doing anything in regards like client data or how you even store client data, you've really got to factor this in. I think the GDPR policies were actually very good, and I certainly like my data to be respected by a third party. So I'm quite happy to do that to clients that work with my firm. So I see it as a duty to do that. So I don't have a problem enforcing GDPR compliance, even if it's not regulatory, or even if it's not like a statute within like British law that we have to do it. I think it's just good practice, and it's good manners, and it's good for business development, because if you treat your clients with respect and their data with respect, they'll like that. If you don't, you're going to get a lot of heat. So that self point, I think, is self-apparent. I don't think anyone's going to have any issue with that. The first point, though, this is what caused all the stir. What I'd like to do, though, before I go into why I'm not perplexed. I know why they're doing it, because a lot of these people are just racist, bigoted, homophobes. Let's just call them out for what they are. And they see anything like this that kind of closes their ability to kind of go onto spaces not owned by them, owned by Catalyst, and spew hate. But we'll get into that in a second. Let's talk about kind of the legal side of this first, then I'll go into kind of my opinion piece on it. I'm going to read you now YouTube's very similar content. I'm picking YouTube specifically because I am recording and uploading via YouTube. You are watching on YouTube. You might be a content creator as well. So let's just talk about, this is their community page notes. So very, very similar to what Catalyst are doing, using the same kind of terminologies. When they talk about communities, obviously, CGL are talking about their website, anything that their kind of IP encompasses. So it's like, I think they took control of the Reddit, like the main Catalyst Reddit. I think they took control of it, but then they handed it back because there were some issues with that in the summer that I discussed before. But, whatever it is, if you're going to an official event that Catalyst are there and got their branding on, that's their community. They're not talking about the world. They can't control the world. They can't tell you what you can say on a forum that they don't control. They're talking about things that they control. And it's the same on YouTube. So what I'm going to talk about here really kind of does relate to everything within the YouTube community, which is basically like the videos and the comments. Or people's like profile descriptions, things like that. Anything that is on this platform is under the YouTube community guideline. And this is how they term it. And this is actually a good way to start here. So YouTube has, let's try again. YouTube has always had a set of community guidelines that outline what type of content isn't allowed on YouTube. These policies apply to all types of content on our platform, including videos, comments, links, thumbnails. So everything, basically. Our community guidelines are a key part of our broader suite of policies and are regularly evaluated in consultation with outside experts and YouTube creators to keep pace with emerging challenges. The next bit just goes into how they kind of enforce guidelines through like human reviewers and machine learning. So we're not going to go into that. What instead I'm going to do is read out the hate speech section of, so they're all kind of in different links. And the hate speech policy on YouTube says the following. Hate speech is not allowed on YouTube. We don't allow content that promotes violence or hatred against individuals or groups based on any of the following attributes, which indicate a protected group status under YouTube's policy. And then it gives a list. Age, caste, disability, ethnicity, gender identity and expression, nationality, race, immigration status, religion, gender, sexual orientation, victims of a major violent event and their kin, I'll talk about that in a second, and veteran status. In fact, the final two are worth a quick chat about. So the victims of a major violent event and their kin relates to what happened with Alex Jones. So when Alex Jones was on here saying that the Sandy Hook tragedy, which was a school shooting in America, he basically came out and was doing lots of videos targeting the families and saying that it was a hoax. The families then took him to court and won and got an untold amount of monies out of Alex Jones. And that is, a lot of those videos were posted on YouTube. And I think that was the real catalyst that led to the downfall of Alex Jones. So he ended up then, if you don't know who Alex Jones is, I'm not even going to give him airtime because guy's a complete scumbag and doesn't deserve anyone talking about him. Suffice to say, he got sued by the victims of the people whose children were murdered. Right, and they're basically saying that you can't go after with your weird and wacky conspiracy theories the victims of people who have had violence done to them, like in a school shooting. And the final one there, which is a really good one, I think, to put in, is military. like veteran status. That I really like, because you do see. I mean, I've worked in industries where we've tried to kind of reach out to like ex-military personnel who are, might be struggling to kind of get a career after they've come out of the military, especially like when you kind of, it sounds horrible really, but like in between wars. So it's like after Afghanistan and Iraq, there was a plethora of like military people, and one of the companies I used to work for did a recruitment drive there to retrain military personnel as lawyers or trainee lawyers. And because I think like the soft skills that military personnel pick up are usually fantastic. They're usually very disciplined. They're usually very timely. There are certain things that they'll probably struggle with in regards to like how civilian life operates, because it's very different in the military. But if you train them accordingly, they're usually a fantastic place to start. And I've actually I had several ex-military people at firms that I've got, not hired them myself. I don't own the company, but I've been involved in interviews where I've kind of always pushed for military people, and I think and they can face discrimination as well. And that's, I think, a very good thing for YouTube to put in there. Anyway, by the by, so Catalyst, let's just break this down in terms of its most logical component first. Most, if not all, companies that operate like a digital presence have community guidelines. Catalyst are one of those companies. They have community guidelines because that is absolutely the standard across these industries. Right, like it's not. I read out the YouTube one. I read out the Catalyst one. Is there a wide variance within those two edicts? No, there isn't. They're basically identical. The YouTube one is more developed, but you would expect that. YouTube are a massive corporate organisation owned by Google. Catalyst are a small gaming company, operating a franchise. So I don't expect the same level of like development. They did say though in the comms that they would be putting more things out, so they might start adding things that that YouTube talked about in there, or going into a bit more detail on what their expectations are. And why it's really important that companies do that. First of all, and it's quite obvious, it's the legal thing. If you turn up to like an event or you're on a forum and someone's getting defamed or like hate directed at them, it becomes a really, really complex legal thing. And online, it's really complicated because you have different laws around different countries. So, for instance, in Britain, we've got really quite developed laws on hate speech. So, if you attack somebody, if you like, it's been a long time since I thought about this really, but if you were attacking someone in the street, let's say you got in like a fight in the street over money, right? And one party ended up really injuring or committing what we call grievous bodily harm or actual bodily harm against another party. The party that does that is going to be in trouble for that. And in law, you operate on two principles. Latin terms, it's called actus reus and mens rea. Actus reus is the action, mens rea is the intention, and those two things combined create a crime. So me punching someone in the face in the street, the action is the punch in the face. The intention is that I want to hurt that person. Now, by definition, if I am punching someone in the face, I have the intention of hurting them. It's pretty, there are defences to that. There are things like, self-defence. Obviously, if someone attacks me in the street, I defend myself and punch them. I am not liable for that. That's self-defence. With hate speech, though, in Britain, it's the same offence. It's just you will be punished harsher for it. So if you go up to someone in the street and attack them because of the colour of their skin or their sexual orientation, the judge will throw the book at you, so to speak. Like your crime is judged as more severe. Now, I've known plenty of lawyers that don't like that. They think that the law should be, just severe and blind to all the kind of outside things. So the discussion that you can have about, are these laws needed? Are they necessary? Should they be more developed? Should they be less developed? That's a different matter entirely. But suffice to say that it's a serious offence in Britain to commit hate crimes against people, whether that's physically or verbally. Keep in mind as well that in the British legal system, assault, so that is actually assault in the British legal system, it might be like this in your country as well, is the fear of being attacked. So if I go up to someone in the street and pull my arm back and say, I am going to punch you in the face, them feeling, oh my goodness, this person's going to punch me in the face, that's assault, right? The actual event, me punching someone in the face, and then it then gets basically judged in two ways. You've got actual bodily harm, which we call ABH. That's when you, if you give someone a black eye. And then you have grievous bodily harm if you punctuate the skin. So if you punch someone in the eye and it basically, I don't know, causes them to have a nosebleed or any kind of severe cut, that's grievous bodily harm, and that's a much more severe offence. And then you add like race crimes on top of that, you're in a lot of trouble, right? And that's why, sorry, I went off a massive tangent there, but now you know all about the English legal system, so there you go. But in terms of like an online thing, if you are posting hate on a digital forum that's hosted in America, and you're posting it in a part of the world where they might have more lax or more severe laws on this, it can just be an absolute nightmare to navigate. And companies know that. And that's why these community guidelines exist. It's to protect the individuals on the site, because they don't, it's obviously a terrible optic for them. And I'm speaking just with a PR hat on here. Forget all the morality of this. If you've got people on community pages committing really horrible hate crimes against people and saying horrible things that you kind of judge like racial or homophobic or any of the kind of other multitudes that Catalyst or YouTube documented there, they're going to pick up the tab for that. They're the ones who, people will be all over saying Catalyst are not closing down this person or this communication, and it now feels like a very like not a community page at all. It's become like a horrible page, and I don't want to go anywhere near it. And that starts to really kind of add into the like PR problems. But second of all, you've got the wider concern, and let's just bring this to its absolute severity. And I'm not saying that this would happen, but let's say that like someone was getting bullied at a community event that Catalyst were hosting, and that person went away and did harm to themselves, to such a point where they ended up ending their life. Can you imagine like the fallout from that? Or, even other things like, they go to an event and there's like a fight between two people and it's all around, I don't know, sexual orientation. Straight away, like Catalyst will get dragged potentially into the liability on that and people will always sue the companies because that's where the money is. So this, by definition, having a community guideline is a method of a company or an organization protecting itself from individuals using that space in a disingenuous manner. Let's just say something like that. And all companies do it, right? And, in general, if you're talking about like the common law, or if you're in a country that has got statute law and case law, everything else, in a public sense, we do that every day, right? Like you go into the street, when you get behind the wheel of a car, you've got a duty of care to kind of protect other road users and pedestrians. If you fall short of that and you fall below that level of expectation, you'll get in trouble. You get in trouble for dangerous driving. You could lose your license. And remember as well, getting behind the wheel of a car is basically getting behind the wheel of potentially a death roller, right? You can do a lot of damage in a car. And it's the same principle, like policing and social convention or what we call, there's a legal convention as well. All these things kind of operate out there in the real world. And to kind of emulate that, a lot of companies go down this digital community guidance platform where they will say, these are our expectations on what you need to adhere to, what your level of behaviour should be at in order to use our platforms. And I will say that again, use our platforms. Why that's so important is that if you're going on to, you're a guest, right? If you're going on to like the main Catalyst news page or whatever it is and commenting, and saying horrible stuff. That's like me, in a digital sense, walking into somebody's house and like smashing up their furniture, right? It's this, or going in there and being really obnoxious and, you know, causing disruption. It's exactly the same premise, and that's where all the disingenuous nature of what I've been seeing comes into. Because the way that people are talking about this, and again, if you read the comment, they very clearly say on channels that we control, right, or that are our channels, that's their house. They've built that. They manage that. That's what they are responsible for in a legal sense and in a moral sense as well. And again, you can equate morality to things like PR. So they don't want to be PR stung because they have something bad go on. So they're protecting themselves from that. They have every right to do it. The way that these... I'll try not to use negative adjectives. So I'm just going to have to say that the people that think that there is a problem going on here. First of all, you're on YouTube, right? So right now, when you are watching this and you are boiling with rage and anger and you are spamming the comments with the woke agenda or whatever else the hell you think about instead of, you know, getting a job and earning money and succeeding in life, that's basically like the trap that that you've fallen into, because you are assuming that YouTube, like I will probably just go on there and like delete those comments, but not all of them. Most of them I'll just ignore if they're just kind of, you know, and if someone comes at me in a logical way, that's fine. But if people start posting like horrible, vicious, nasty, even like defamation on there, I'll just delete it, because that's my platform with on YouTube, and I have every right to do that. I don't have terms and conditions, but I just use the YouTube community guidelines, right? So I can control our little kind of sphere here. And you watching me now, well, first of all, you're a massive hypocrite if you are against like any kind of community guidelines, because you're engaging on a platform that absolutely has them, right? So, you know, there you go. Catalyst have the exact same guidelines as well. So if you go onto like their kind of platforms and do the same thing, it's exactly the same as going onto YouTube and doing it. And if someone flags you, if you say something that's like beyond the pale or goes beyond what is like acceptable, and it gets flagged and then you receive a ban, you can't complain about it, because you've gone into someone else's house, caused major disruption, and then you've been thrown out. And what are you going to do then? Sit outside the window shouting about how you've been unfairly treated? You haven't been unfairly treated. You've been an idiot. So go home. You are drunk, as the expression goes. And the level of disingenuousness comes in when I hear these people saying things like, they're destroying free speech, or they're trying to, you know, they're pushing an agenda down their throat. No, what they're saying is, be respectful to people, and if you've been brought up correctly, and if you've been, you know, if you are a solid member of your community and society, and you don't go around causing trouble and problems for people, then you won't have any issue with that whatsoever. You're not going to be sat there thinking, I feel completely, ridiculed and victimized because I've been told that I can't go onto these platforms and start shouting visceral at people. And where, again, on the disingenuous front, they then equate it to these like logical scenarios where it's like, well, where does it stop? I won't be able to go on there and say anything. Like, no, that's not what they are saying. And if they did, they'd get called out on that. Like, and we'll talk about this in a second, because I'm going to be very critical about them on the IP front here. So I'm not reading this and just like simping for Catalyst. I'm reading it as the thing that a lot of people got like really upset about is farcical, for the simple reason that every company does it, pretty much, like in an online space. Even like Facebook groups will do it. They'll say stuff like that on, you know, no hateful content against other users. You know, don't be posting in, you know, hate speech, all that kind of stuff. It's completely standardized across the net now. Catalyst have gone from a very small firm to a, you know, well, they're still a small firm, but they're getting bigger. They're getting more interaction, they're getting more traction, so they have to really kind of think about, and they've probably got some lawyers involved in it, so there's probably some edicts come down from tops as well. If you own the IP, right, you're getting big enough now, we really need to sort out your community guidelines, right? Which is exactly what YouTube have done, which is exactly what all the companies that you deal with online do. So just do me a favour and stop talking nonsense about this subject, because you deal with that every day. And when Catalyst did it and people were on there like Catalyst had shot their dog personally, is that literally the most pathetic, childish, stupid thing I've ever seen in like the several years that I've been like covering content on here. It's embarrassing. You're embarrassing yourself. And I can feel you already boiling with anger, smashing on the keyboard in the comment section. It's a reflection of you. This is your problem, right? If you have like homophobic, racist tendencies, I mean, I don't want to know you for one, and anyone who's cut from any kind of decent cloth will just think that you are, not worthy of their time. And you shouldn't be in a space where you can direct that visceral and hatred towards people. Least of all, friends of mine. That's when I get very heated and upset about it. So that's kind of my thoughts on that first point. And again, I was debating just kind of jumping into the IP thing. But I spoke to someone about this yesterday, who I was kind of saying, should I even cover this? Should I even bother? Right? Because these are I know for a fact that this video will get more views than usual. Right? Again, you know me well enough now. If you've been watching me, I don't care about subs and views. You might think that's some kind of marketing thing. It's not at all. It's just part of my hobby. I love the BattleTech community. I do it because I love it. Where I kind of feel slightly tenuous putting videos like this out there is that I feel like I'm adding to the noise, and it feels like I'm almost kind of going into those areas on clickbait. And again, it's something I have to wrestle with, because I don't want to be that content creator. I'd much rather just stay at the kind of very low fi level that I have and have the brilliant community that I kind of operate with and speak to on a regular basis. The more the merrier on that front. If people are of that ilk and I get to know them, fantastic. What I don't want to do, I don't want that kind of like faceless channel where I'm putting stuff out there and then I'm thinking about how to kind of manipulate the algorithm. But why I covered this is because I really did feel like I couldn't cover the issues with the IP and not the issues with the community, because I feel like that would be a deafening silence against people who, take a lot of heat from very, very horrible people across the community. And I feel a bit duty bound, really, a bit obligated to kind of give my opinion on that and to say that, no, it's actually not okay. And there are plenty of community content creators, even if they are not vocal about it, which is their right not to be vocal about it. Be very clear about that, because it can be a very disruptive thing in your life if you're getting like a lot of heat directed at you online. I personally don't care, but a lot of people do, and I would never put pressure on anyone to do that. But I feel like if I don't do it, I'm allowing these people who say these horrible things just to get away with it. Right? And in a sense, then I kind of think of it more like, well, if I act as a bit of a lightning rod to take the idiots and direct hate at me, well, I'm a big boy and I work PR for law firms. So believe you me, I can deal with crisis, like crisis comms. So I really don't care. I mean, I will either just ignore it or laugh at it. If it breaches onto kind of defamation, you might be hearing from my lawyer. Because I know a lot of defamation lawyers and a lot of them owe me a lot of favours. So by all means, go hard in on the comments. I'd actually quite like that. That'd be quite a fun thing to do. So yeah, challenge me at your will. But that's why I kind of, in a way, I thought, well, I have to do it. If I make this video about the IP, I must cover the community side of it. So there we go. Let's get on to the IP bit anyway. I know we're 34 minutes into it, but I knew that this would be a long video. So, I'd probably give myself like another 15, 20 minutes to talk about this. So IP in BattleTech is a mess. It's been a mess for many, many years. I've covered it on this channel. There's plenty of stuff out there. If you know anything about it, that Top's on the tabletop, Microsoft on the digital, Disney on a lot of the Well, they own the old rights to the cartoon. I don't know if they've still got rights to like the if they do like a TV series or a movie about BattleTech. Could own that as well. I'm not 100% sure. What that means is though is that the tabletop IP has always been relatively secure, and I'm going to broach this back a little bit and talk about like the history really of where BattleTech was developed from, and why I think the comms that Catalyst put out are really quite. I think in a way they're quite naive. I'm not directing any major heat at them. I just think that they need to be a little bit smarter about how they communicate this to a community that's just not used to it. And you know what I'll do is I'll just read it out, right? So this is the third point on the community announcement that we discussed earlier. So, protect the IP, the intellectual property. Illegal use of any CGL intellectual property is forbidden. Breaking this rule will result in a warning with additional infractions resulting in a ban. Right, so let's talk a bit. We'll talk about that statement in a second. Let's talk about like the history of BattleTech for a hot minute. BattleTech has never been a miniatures company before the resurgence several years ago with Catalyst. Now, what I mean by that is there have pretty much always been BattleTech miniatures. So in the early days, like you got them from Ralpartha, but the game orientation and the fan base were always far more concentrated on BattleTech as a like a beer and pretzel game. So you could just kind of pull it out. You had like the cardboard standees, and you could just play it at your leisure. And then if you wanted to get deeper into it, BattleTech became a very like mathematical game. So, you know, if you kind of wanted to run a campaign where you're kind of darting around the inner sphere and you're using like fuel and ammo and you're buying mechs and you're selling mechs and you're getting salvage, tracking all that was kind of, it was almost like a, I don't know what you call it. It was, you know, now you can do that on a computer game, right? So it's much easier to kind of track all that digital or through like an Excel sheet or whatever. But back in the 80s, when that didn't really, or that level of complexity didn't exist, you had to do it with basically a pen and paper. And if you're talking about like a geeky community, they love that kind of stuff. I quite like that kind of stuff, but I'm much more a tabletop gamer. But I completely appreciate the depth, and I'm doing that series of videos right now on campaign operations and how detailed and complex and rich that is as a book and as a piece of work. It's fantastic. But the community for me, like the old guard of BattleTech, which I really don't count myself in because I came into BattleTech when I was I think I was about 11 or 12, something like that. Dropped out for years and years and came back very, very hard, like in my mid-30s, so like 6-7 years ago, to a point where I'm, doing like online content about it now and everything else. So I don't consider myself a home guard. One of one of the old guard of BattleTech. I come from very much the Games Workshop model, which is the notion that Games Workshop are a miniatures company before they are anything else. So before GW are a rules company or a law company, their business model is all orientated around models. So in Games Workshop, for many, many years, and Games Workshop have always been a very, very cutthroat organisation. People forget that. I think people assume that back in the 80s, they were just like a really chill group of guys in Nottingham who were just, no. I categorically can tell you that is not the point. I know that because they sold the company to venture capital quite early. And the guy that made Games Workshop, or one of the founding fathers of it, sold it as quickly as he could to cash out an absolute ton of money, which basically set him up for life. That's the culture that Games Workshop come from. And then their entire business model after that has been oriented towards making money, right? And that's why they are wildly successful. BattleTech, although there was a commercial aspect to BattleTech, they were far, far more naive on the commercial front than Games Workshop were. So for years and years, obviously, you only had the metal miniatures through like Ralpartha. The custodians of the IP, so like FASA, And I presume that, I don't know for sure because it's a long time ago, but FASA will have just like given the rights to make the mechs out to Ralpatha, and then subsequently now Ironwind do it. Ralpatha still do it in Europe, just out of interest if you wanted to know. There is still a Ralpatha. I buy models on there. They still have the old metal minis on there. So by doing that, you've got a culture within like the core community, which is very much orientated towards, we're not really a miniatures company. You get players in there who will have like massive old metal collections. And then the advent of 3D printing came around, which hasn't been around too long. This is only something that's really existed for the past like several years. And it kind of, before kind of Catalyst did all the big releases on the Kickstarters, the plastic models that you could get from 3D printing were a thing. And that was, it is a godsend, right? Like you can either get a 3D printer yourself and make your own models and terrain and everything else, or you can kind of go to a company who will do that for you, ship it to you and charge you the money for it. So Catalyst now, this is my opinion on it, my take. Catalyst are completely, in a lot of ways, and a lot of this might come from Topps, so Topps might be saying to them, you need to defend our IP. You've got to kind of get on this legally, because they will be legally duty obliged to do that. But I don't know how far Topps like go in on it and say, you've got to do this, or we're going to, you're going to lose the franchise, something. I don't think it's necessarily that serious, but it's certainly something that a company like Topps will absolutely be looking at and trying to protect. But I think now with Catalyst, they're going up against a community that are just so used to having options across the board. They're not like Games Workshop fans who have been used from like a long time ago of being told, these are our miniatures and play with our miniatures and turn up to our shop and use our miniatures. Now, granted, Games Workshop used to be a hell of a lot more flexible and liberal about this than they are now. I can't even imagine what kind of reception you get if you rocked up to Games Workshop with like a, BattleTech, but with BattleTech miniatures and asked to play BattleTech, you'd just get escorted to the door. Maybe back in the day they were more flexible, or maybe the manager had some autonomy about it. They certainly don't now. But Games Workshop has always had a very, very good understanding of its own brand, its own placement in the market, and more importantly, its fan base. Now I think what's happened is Catalyst have done all this line of incredible new plastic miniatures, which have really just revolutionised BattleTech, in the grand scheme of things, and have really kind of allowed the IP to take off again, including that amazing £7.5 million Kickstarter from March 2023. But they're going up against people that are just not used to this. And I really want to be clear about this and separate it out. There is a world of difference between, when this community note went out, there is a massive world of difference between the people who were saying, these community guidelines are disgusting and I should be able to say what I want and this is just the woke agenda, or whatever else nonsense they picked up from weirdos on YouTube or elsewhere. The IP thing, that I did see a lot of people saying, does this mean I can't print 3D models anymore? And that's where my critique comes. And I think that there is a legit reason for Catalyst especially. Catalyst have to be so careful about this, because they really do risk alienating a chunk of their audience, and a good chunk, a nice chunk of the audience as well, who are just going about their business trying to do some hobby stuff. And I know that they did garner a lot of heat because somebody posted on one of the official Catalyst pages, I think it was a picture of a wolfhound and the bull shark. Now, the wolfhound is an official Catalyst product. You get the wolfhound in multiple box sets. Very famous mech, obviously. The bull shark is technically not canon. It's a mech that, if you've ever played the High-Brain Scheme game, it was a very popular mech in that. You basically go on like a Lost Tech adventure and you find this like proto-clan mech. It's an amazing mech as well in the game. It's a fantastic model. It's got like, you can stick like tons of UAC 5s on it, and it's an absolute machine. But someone, some company or other had basically done the 3D models for this, and someone had put that up there. And Catalyst then were like, please be advised. I think I can't remember the exact wording. It was something like, "Oh, models look great. However, that's a 3D model, and we don't allow that on our community pages." And I think, quite justifiably in terms of confusion, people were like, "But it's not a canon mech." Right, and the Catalyst are right in many ways. I think that, and that legal thing will be very complex, right? So the Bull Shark, which is was a mech on Harebrained Schemes, which is a licensed out part of the IP. Therefore, even if it's not canon on tabletop, it's still part of the BattleTech franchise. Ergo, is it breaching IP? You'd need a room of probably 10 lawyers to give you that answer. I certainly can't. But what I'm trying to get at is, it's ambiguous. And I think if Catalysts are choosing to die on that hill about the Bull Shark, they're going to get a lot of heat from people, and probably quite justifiably saying, hang on a minute, you don't make the Bull Shark. So what business is it of yours if I'm putting out this model of something that you can't sell anywhere? And Catalysts, remember, only own the rights on the tabletop side of things. And I think that's, people, again, legally it will be really complex, but it's that, why are you, I'll use that term again, why are you dying on that hill for something that you're not going to make money out of anyway? I mean, I doubt that Catalyst could ever make the Bull Shark, because it's something that exists within the Harebrained Schemes game, which is a different company. So it's what I'm saying, it's messy, and fair enough, and you got to give Catalyst some leeway. The BattleTech IP is insanely complicated and insanely annoying in terms of how it's kind of split, and it's caused all manner of problems over the years. However, I do look at it like, if you are going to manage that, don't just put out a one-liner saying, protect our IP. That it's too ambiguous, it's too vague. I'd really kind of focus. I mean, if I were Catalyst, if I were dealing with this, I would, first of all, if you had companies who were just openly, breaching their copyright and intellectual property. So basically, you're doing the STL files, which are the kind of the root files that create the 3D prints. I don't 3D print myself, so I think that's what they're called anyway. Or people who are printing their own plastic miniatures and then shipping them out to people. If they're using the same name, so if you've got I don't know, let's use an iconic mech in BattleTech, the Atlas. If you've got a mech that looks like an Atlas, got all the guns in the same part of an Atlas, and you call the mech an Atlas, and you're selling it as a 3D print and you're monetizing it and make money off it, that's IP breach, that's copyright breach. That's pretty clear. If you're smart about it, you could I'll give you an example. You could create the Catless and put some silly cat ears on there and call it a Canopian Atlas, a Catless, and give it maybe maybe make it into a specific variant of an Atlas. So don't just have the regular AC-10, the SRMs, the LRMs, and the lasers in the arms, whatever. Just maybe make it so that it doesn't look as much like an Atlas as it probably should. I'm guessing that is still copyright breach. However, Catalyst are probably just going to look at that and laugh, as opposed to go and close you down. And I don't think Catalyst are in that frame of mind anyway. They get told they have to enforce the IP, and they do. I think realistically, I mean, they make a lot of money and they do very well. I think they'd probably be like, yeah, live and let live on that one. If people want to get 3D prints, that's fine. But they are, like all of us, they're kind of, they're accountable to a higher power, in their case, Tops and Fanatics, who are very big companies. So it's a really, really complicated issue. It's something that you have to really, I think, you need to give some leeway to Catalyst because it is so complex. But I think they also need to be told, be specific. Go sit down with whoever, whether it's the lawyers at Tops or their own lawyers or whatever, and just say, what are we doing here? Right? It's like with Games Workshop. Games Workshop have got a very blanket approach to this. They just go after people. Right? If you breach their copyright IP, you will get roasted. They will send people to close you down. I get people in the community get around it, right? So I'll give you an example. Blood Bowl. I am a long-time player of Blood Bowl. It's one of my favourite games. Blood Bowl released a wonderful second seasoned edition several years ago. I've got all the teams for it. They're all up here basically. And that's every team from like second season. They released the Vampires a few months ago, so that was the last team that I got. When I was a kid, my favourite team to play, and I had the full team in Metal, but it got sold years ago. I loved the Chaos Dwarfs. I was always a big Chaos Dwarf fanboy, loved playing them. I've not played them in years because Games Workshop have not released the official Chaos Dwarfs team. And I was thinking, there was one point, I think like last year I was playing Blood Bowl. I can't remember what it was now. It wasn't last year, it must have been the year before, because I didn't do much gaming at all last year because I was with all the house move and doing all the redevelopment on the property. So the year before I was playing, and I really wanted to play Chaos Dwarfs, and I looked at some options, and I went on like, I started on like Kickstarter because I'd seen that some people were putting teams out on there, and there's loads of them. There's like multiple options for getting like Chaos Dwarf teams, and they don't call. I mean, they're very smart how they talk about it, right? Like they don't call it Blood Bowl Chaos Dwarf team. But the people who create these things, I think Games Workshop, because it's Blood Bowl and it's not one of their like major IPs, I think they just kind of let it slide. And as well, like I think the Blood Bowl community, because it's quite niche and small, it's a bit like BattleTech's community, but within Games Workshop or within the Games Workshop mold. It's got a rule set that hasn't changed in 3 decades. Right, it's very very similar to BattleTech. It's had like minor changes basically, but they don't go after that. But if the people creating these teams if they started calling it like anything like the Chaos Dwarf team that, or blah 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 blah, that relates directly to their IP, they'd get shut down. Games Workshop would send people after them. But I think the third party, that's the technical term for it, who are making these like interrelated products and then selling them and monetizing off it, they're not causing any damage across the community, right? Like, in fact, they're enhancing it. And I like one of my favourite YouTube channels. And if you like Blood Bowl, you absolutely should go and check them out. A few guys called The Bonehead. I think it's like the Bonehead podcast, but they've got like a YouTube channel. He's like my go-to guy for Blood Bowl stuff. He's fantastic. He just he goes through like kind of all the like the latest stats and which teams are hot, which teams aren't, and they document a lot about all these like 3D printed teams, and they love them, and it enhances the community. Like they are not buying Games Workshop stuff. Like when the new team comes out, they buy it immediately. But then they might have several variants of the team, so they might have one. Like the official Imperial Nobility team, they might have 2 3D models of it, and then they might have their own proxy model of it. In terms of teams, so it's like 16 players. So, like I said, the IP, I think companies understand that the commercial aspect to this has to be respected. If you go in too hard on people, you'll get a lot of heat, and it will shut down the community as well. And it's the last thing absolutely the last thing that Catalyst will want to do. But I just think their communications just have to be much, much tighter. And they've got to be much more sophisticated when they're getting this message across to a community that are just so used to using like proxy models and 3D prints. And if they don't do that, I think that really is an alienating factor. And again, just to be very clear about that, having within that community statement, having an issue about that absolutely is valid. You have every right to ask questions about this and critique it if you don't agree with it, because I think in a sense Catalyst might agree with you and may have to go back to Tops and say, look, we're damaging our community here if we go in too hard on them. On that first point though, the issue of just basically being a civilized human being to other human beings at official Catalyst events, like I said, if you have to be told that, there's a problem. First point. Second point, you are a guest on these forums and community events that they are hosting. And if you don't respect that, then you obviously have no respect for yourself or your own surroundings, because if you're not even willing to do it at somebody else's house, what's the state of your own, abode? And I'm not talking about your actual where you live, I'm talking about your state of mind. Now that's me being very British, because we British are very civilized, don't you know? And I wouldn't dream of like going to an event sponsored by someone and causing a ruckus there, because I had an issue with, well, I mean, first of all, because I'm not a racist, so that would mitigate all that. If you do have to be told that, though, or you are doing what I consider very childish, stupid things. I mean, there was a spate of this in like the 40k community. A guy once rocked up with I can't remember what he did. It was like a 40k tournament. Like all the models that he brought were like Nazi paraphernalia or something like, I can't remember. It was something like that. Anyway, I didn't really follow it too much, and I think he just got asked to leave. If you do that, you should be asked to leave. Like who? Like the only reason you are doing that is for shock, and it's because you're incredibly immature. I don't think, like I said, I know that the default position on that would be to kind of just, oh, somebody's a Nazi. I genuinely don't think that would be the case. I think it's just it's like that time that Prince Harry got caught wearing the swastika around his arm. Prince Harry is not a Nazi. He was just a silly boy, right? And I think like these silly boys, that's probably a good way to term them actually, who are on, they basically, it's the same grift model, right? So, and if you think like this, you won't have got this far into the channel, into the video. So I'm saying this to the echo chamber really, but you are part of a grift, and I will explain to you why you are part of a grift. And I don't create any other heat with other community members. I'm never going to call anyone out directly. I just would feel uncomfortable doing that. If you're involved in BattleTech YouTube at all and you watch BattleTech channels, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So I don't even need to reference them. There are a couple of channels out there who act as like demagogues for this, like what I just term antisocial behaviour. And what they do is they'll create content out of a completely, what did somebody say on Twitter the other day, a nothing burger, right? So something like a terms and conditions community page section, which all other firms have, they then get that and they'll spin it like Catalyst are going to basically like burst through your door, smash all your miniatures up, set fire to your house, right? And that's literally, like, I've seen the rhetoric of that of like spiraling out of control, and it's completely laughable. And what the demagogues then do is and this is why I said, this is why I was deliberating not doing this video, because I know that it will garner that, not that on that level, it won't be getting like hundreds of thousands of views or anything, but I don't want to be part of that machine. Even as a contrarian to their viewpoint, I don't want to be part of that. Even having to do videos like this is farcical, and and I do it because I feel like people are being targeted across the community and bullied, and these bullies, the demagogues, basically get them all worked up. They're just like a group of wolves, right? So like the pack leader will be like, let's direct all our hate and frustration and the fact that we are just failures, let's just go and blame these other people over here. It's like the oldest trick in the book, while they monetize their channels, get money from the views that people give them, who they then rile up. The tell for me, one of the tells, not the only one, because a lot of good content creators do this as well, but if you've got people doing like, say, 3 to 5 hour podcasts, where they do super chats and monetize things, what they're doing is, like, by going on there and giving them that attention and that buzz and maybe the direct money as well, that's what they want from you. They want your time, they want your soul, they want your money. It's a grift, right? There are plenty of BattleTech content creators who are not grifting, right? There are plenty of BattleTech community creators who are honest and objective and fair and deserve your time and your effort. And if you want to give them money to keep them going. You know who they are and I know who they are. And likewise, you know who the grifters are and I know who the grifters are. And the grifters, much like, it's not like brown shirt mentality of, look and point and go attack. And that's exactly what they are doing here. Like I said, it's despicable. It's childish. I know, like, people throw all manner of things around, like calling people fascists and and whatnot. I always kind of stay away from that because I think it's a very complicated social problem, actually. I think radicalization via YouTube is a ginormous problem. In fact, what I would suggest you do is, again, if you are watching this and you are boiling now with visceral and hatred for me daring to question your worldviews, which by definition, if you get livid over somebody questioning your worldview is probably not worth very much. If you can't debate it sensibly in regards like, this is my point and I just know it to be true, then you've fallen at the first hurdle, really. Going on there and starting spitting heat at people just shows the insecurities. You don't have an argument. And in this case, you don't have an argument. But if you're going to at least take that on board and listen to what I have to say now, go and watch, and I'll put the link in the description below. I will, if this goes out, I'll put it in there. And I never swear on my channel, but I'm going to have to swear now, so you're going to have to forgive me. But it's the name of the podcast. It's called Behind the Bastards. It's done by a journalist. He does like a series of videos on like historical characters who are just awful. And he chooses quite interesting people as well to kind of document. Alex Jones did a great series on Alex Jones. He's already been mentioned tonight. But one of the fantastic channels that he does, it's on YouTube. You go on YouTube, I'll get it through your podcast provider. He does one on how YouTube has basically radicalized a generation through the algorithm. And I would ask you all, again, you might be spitting the feathers at this point, but if you want some help, right? Because I will insult you. I will call you out for what I think you are. But I also, the human part of me, would like to see you come back into the fold, right? And you can start there. Listen to the YouTube radicalization podcast or the YouTube show. Both the same content, obviously. It's only a couple of hours. And it documents in there how the YouTube algorithm puts people down rabbit holes for views. And what you then get is grifters manipulating that to get the views off the back of that. It's very disruptive. It causes chaos in people's lives. It's caused like the entire cottage industry that is conspiracy theory nonsense, which is disruptive and again, it's just one giant grift. And as is the YouTube hate grift. That's another grift. And I would ask you again, whatever you can be like. You can have opinions on things that don't include hate and are still considered, like reasonable within the context of whether you want to call yourself a conservative or a liberal or whatever. You can have, I have some views that are kind of outside the box a little bit, but if you're veering into that like hate category, the chances are, especially if you are under 30, categorically said, I mean, I'm 41, so I saw a world without the internet. And I can certainly see this in like the younger generation and how YouTube has really kind of impacted on this. Go and watch that, go and listen to it, and then look yourself in the mirror and ask if you are being radicalized on YouTube. That's all I'm going to say. Because if you are, and then you are failing in your own life, it's not me, it's not transgender people, it's not gay people, it's not women. It's that you have made bad life choices, and those bad life choices are being given validity by people who are now putting you down dark rabbit holes to monetize your time. That's all it boils down to. And you can direct as much heat as you want to me in the comment section. I can say it will either fall on deaf ears or I'll just delete it if it's like beyond the pale. But ultimately, it's your decision to break out of it. I will offer it up now. If you ever come round to the light side, I will have that discussion with you. Right? I've done that with a few people across the BattleTech community, actually, where I've kind of offered that. Because I've had people say pretty vile things about me and then come back and apologise several weeks later or whatever. I'm always open to that. I always give people second chances. But, again, if you go after my friends, I will come at you, bro. So there you are. I mean, it's not rocket science. I'm loyal to people, and I have so much love for the BattleTech community, and watching what happened to some of them, I mean, it made me very angry. It also really, really upset me. And I got, I go over the top on social media as well. I freely admit it. I'm far too prickly on there, but I just feel like Catalyst of, they've put this thing out there with completely good intention. There's no intention there other than to protect themselves and the community, and it's like this vocal minority cannot accept that and just cause abject disruption, and it's completely unwarranted. It's completely unacceptable. Anyway, on that somber note, I will leave it. You may or may not see this video. It may be deleted the second I click stop recording here. We shall see. I'm also, again, might turn the comments off if I do post it, just for the sake of, that might be a good idea actually, because then if I can do it, I've never even turned comments off on a YouTube video before. However, that will then push the video down the algorithm, because comments mean that it goes up the algorithm and people will comment on this video. So maybe then that's quite a good idea. That might mitigate the hatred, and will also mean that the video will only be watched by people that seek it out as well. Hopefully, again, I'm too small for kind of any algorithm shenanigans, because you've got to be monetized really to kind of get those advantages. Anyway, I will leave it there this time. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you at least learned something there about the British legal system. So if you're ever in Britain, you can self-defend yourself. And if you are going to hit somebody, just make sure that you don't draw blood, because that's a much more severe crime. So there you go. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you again next time.